One of the most useful objects in Dart is the list, which is equivalent to an array in other languages. The first thing I want to point out, though, is that a list inherits its behavior from a more fundamental class called an iterable. An iterable is just a collection of objects. The three most common iterables that you'll find in Dart are the list, the map, and the set. A list is like an array where each item in the list has an index. When you define a list, you can add a generic type using angle brackets. For example, if we want a list of integers, we add int as the generic type, then we define the actual list with brackets. This is known as the literal syntax for creating a list. Once created, you can then access individual items in the list using brackets followed by the index that you want to access. Or if you want to access multiple items at the same time, you can use sublist followed by the starting index and ending index. That will return a new list with only the items between those two indexes. It's also worth noting that there are other ways to create a list that don't use the literal syntax. A useful one is filled, which allows you to fill a new list with as many items as you'd like, and a static value at each index. This can be useful if you want to create a loop over X number of items. You can get the total size of a list by using the length property, and it also has first and last properties to get the first and last elements in the list. To push a new item to the end of the list, use the add method, or to pop an item off the end of the list, use the remove last method. Now, earlier in the course, we looked at how to set up a for loop, but you can also use a for loop on iterables themselves. We can say for n in list to loop over each item in the list. That's convenient, but we also have more functional options as well, like the for each method on the list itself. This will also loop over every item in the list and call a callback function for each iteration. And there's a variety of other functional looping methods as well, one of the most useful of which is map. It takes the original list and runs a callback on each item to transform the value into a new list. For example, if we want to double the integers in the list, we call map, then the callback function will multiply each one of those items by 2. Map is incredibly useful in Flutter as well, because you'll often have a list of data and need to map it to a list of UI widgets. And speaking of Flutter, another useful thing to know is how to combine multiple lists together. Dart supports the spread syntax, allowing you to compose a new list from one or more existing lists. Use brackets to create the new list, and then use a triple period to merge or concatenate the old list into a new one. Another cool feature of this literal syntax is that you can use conditional logic directly inside of it. For example, if you want to create a list of items, but one of those items should only be added based on a certain condition, you can just add an if statement directly inside of the brackets. And that's also a very useful one for Flutter when you only want to show a widget in a list based on a certain condition.